creepy and geeky. Welcome to the Double Feature podcast of Horror and More. I'm your host, Robert, and today is part one in a four-part look at the Halloween franchise. On this episode, Jerry Smith joins me to talk about Halloween 1 through 3. Jerry has been a film journalist for magazines and websites for over a decade. They are also the film composer for Puppet Master, Dr. Death, and Sorority Babes in the Slime Bowl Bolorama 2, as well as a two-time award winner for Best Score for work on Stitches and Hangnail. Their debut novella, Reunion, is coming out this year. And finally, Jerry is also the composer of the music here on the podcast now. Welcome to the show, Jerry.
Thank you. I'm so excited to do this. We've had so many false starts and reschedules that it really made my day to finally be able to come on.
Oh man, I've been wanting you on forever, and yeah, for sure. Like, I understand totally about all the false starts and everything. Stuff, life gets in the way, and it's more important.
Oh, it does. It's like Jurassic
podcast.
Park.
Right. But yeah, but it's awesome to finally get you on, and I'm very much, I want to tell you in person, or as in person as we can, that thank you so much for allowing me to use your music for the podcast as well.
No, anytime. I love the show just as a listener. So yeah, I was really excited when you reached out.
Yeah. All right. Well, I love your music, so that's was just, as soon as I thought about it, I was like, wait, I could maybe ask him, and ask them to use their music, and so
Mm-hmm.
it was really great for me as well to up my music game on that. So, so all right, so we're going to start off. This is your first time on the podcast, hopefully not your last, but so being that this is the first time, I like to ask guests, what was your first horror movie?
My first horror movie. See, this is the interesting one because I know what the first one as in its entirety was, but before that, I had bits and pieces, and it took
Okay.
so many years of my life to figure out what those movies were. I remember walking into my living room where my parents and my aunt, my uncle were watching the opening of Hellraiser, with the hooks come
Okay.
out and kill Frank. And I remember as a kid thinking are my parents murderers? Like, what is this? This can't be a movie. So that is the first thing. But the actual first movie that really set in motion this lifelong love, my grandma practically raised me. Like, my mom kind of abandoned us when I was a kid. My dad didn't really know or want to be a parent. So kind of my grandma kind of took the reins and everything. And she was so obsessed with a particular movie that she kept wanting to show it to me. And she would tell me
Okay.
what it's about, and I was just like, nah, I'm good. And so one day she sat me down. She's like, you're going to love this movie called Jaws. And I was
Oh,
like,
okay.
I guess. And I was like maybe 5, 6, 7 years old. And I watched that movie, and I am not kidding. I have not set foot in the ocean since. Like, I am absolutely terrified. And I'm 42 now. I'm terrified of the ocean because of that movie. Like,
I don't
anytime my
blame you.
family and I, right? Anytime my family and I go to the beach, I'll look at my wife and kids and how they're having fun, and I'm just sitting there like a stick in the mud, all because my grandma felt the need to traumatize me as a kid.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm the same way. I've no desire to get in the ocean, and I've and I didn't get this. I didn't. I sure I saw Jaws early on as a kid, but I don't really recall it. So it wasn't until much later that I finally
Mhm.
watched it.
And what's
Just a
cool
few
about it
years
is
ago.
I know there's a recent trend of everyone they like to crap on classic movies and act like they're not rightfully they're called classics, like they don't have the
Right.
right to be. But Jaws is a movie I have seen so many hundreds of times. It's kind of like the first Halloween in the sense that it has never once lost a single ounce of its power for me. Jaws
Hmm,
still scares the living hell out of me. And
that's funny.
Halloween, even though it's pop culture and everyone knows it and loves it, Halloween to me, the first one, is still the scariest movie I've ever seen. It terrifies me
Interesting.
every single time I watch it.
Interesting. Interesting. Definitely going to get into that. Yeah, no, I like, I think, Jaws doesn't scare me. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't go in the water, but it scares me enough. Because there's uh this person that my wife saw on YouTube once, and the woman on there was just like, I don't go into the water because that's the shark's home. You know, I'm like, we stay out of the shark's home. They stay out of our home. We stay out of their home. And I was just like, yes, that's perfect. That's, we don't want to feed the sharks. So, but but I do think, having recently seen it for the first time, as far as I know, I enjoyed the movie. I definitely can see why it was a classic and why people have resonated with it over the years. So I get it. It didn't fully grab me, and maybe because I'm much older now and I've seen lots of movies that are similar
Mhm.
to it. And, it's one of those things that I've seen not all, but I've seen some of the derivatives of it since then. And so it's lost
Yeah.
some of that, because of that. But,
hmm
um,
My
but
wife
it's
made
still a
it
good
worse
movie.
for me. My wife
Oh,
made it
no.
worse for me because I was already terrified of Jaws in the ocean. But then she pulled up, I think, a percentage of how little that we actually know what is in the ocean.
Right.
5%, you said? Oh God. She said 5%. And that that even made it worse. Like I cannot not go to the beach soon enough.
Yeah. No, it's scary what's in it. Like, we know so very little about the ocean. It's weird what is in there, that we do
Mhm.
not know about. So I agree. It's yeah, just stay out. There's no reason to go in there.
Who cares
Uh,
about fun?
yeah, right. Hey, I can have plenty of fun just sitting on the beach. Okay, that's
Right?
perfectly fine for me. I'm with you, man.
Voyeurism.
Exactly. Hey, get a nice umbrella, get that sea breeze, and just crack open a book. It's all good.
Yeah. Someone gets bit by a shark. You know what? That was their choice.
Yeah, they went in. It's not my problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So that leads us into this Halloween franchise. And we're gonna go ahead and jump into number one, the classic John Carpenter's Halloween, the one that started it all. Oh, so when did you first see this and how did you see it?
My relationship with the Halloween franchise is such a unique one, and I've written so many articles about it, and I just get so excited just to talk about them in general. Uh, I discovered the series actually through Halloween 4 first.
Okay.
I came from a broken home as a kid, and my mom, unfortunately, her second marriage was to an extremely abusive person who kind of singled me out, was extremely physical and sexually abusive to me as a kid and broke my mom's back. And to keep me away from the dude, my mom, while she was in the hospital, used to give me enough money to stay in the theater that we lived next door to from open to close. And this is early 80s, mid 80s,
Yeah.
pre Columbine. So they didn't really card kids as long as you had a note. They really didn't care. And
Yeah.
one of the first day that I went to the theater to kind of escape my stepfather at the time, I had no idea what was playing. I had no idea what I was going to watch. I was just a 7-year-old kid in a theater by myself, which as a 42-year-old with multiple kids, like that's terrifying to me. But
Yeah.
I was 7 years old. I looked at the posters, and there was one poster that just stood out, and I had no idea what the movie was. It scared me, it excited me. I had no idea what it was. It was just this big white mask with a house in the background, and it just said Halloween 4. I had no idea that there were three before that. So I got a ticket. I had my mom's note. I got a ticket and I watched it, and that movie changed my life. And that sounds silly to say, but it did. It took a scared little kid who was being preyed on every single night, and it taught me how to endure. It taught me how to survive. It taught me how to like face my own boogeyman and just make it through. And I became obsessed with that movie that day. Like Halloween, Halloween, the first one's my favorite movie of all time, but Halloween 4, there isn't a single motion picture in the world in history that means as much to me as that one. So as soon as I got out of that movie, I begged my mom. I went to the hospital. I begged my mom to give me enough allowance to go to our local video store that had like 5 movies for 5 days for $5. And I rented the first three Halloween movies. And it just became a lifelong obsession because of the just Halloween 4. And when I saw the first movie, I was taken back by, like, it sounds kind of mean to say to Halloween 4 because it's such an important movie to me, but I was taken back like how multiple levels above that movie the first one was. Because I was watching it, I was like, what? How did this person's mask get better, in the older movies? Like,
Yeah.
what, he doesn't have a Casper looking mask in the first ones. Uh, but yeah, I saw it, and Halloween, there's something special about that first movie. Like, and it's been said to death by so many millions of people, but there is something so wonderfully unique about that movie. And I'm sure we'll get into it when we touch on Halloween too. But there's so much magic in the lack of reasoning, the lack of why in the first movie, and that's what makes it so scary to me. I'm
Right.
terrified of home invasions. I'm terrified of my kids being stalked. I'm terrified of all that stuff. It's like my biggest fears. Halloween, the
Right.
first one, is not about some slasher looking for a relative, which I feel
Yeah.
like really hurt the series as it went on. It's
Right.
about an escaped person, an escaped criminal, kind of like, you know, like someone drops the key off at the wrong house. She kind of resembles his sister that he murdered, and he just becomes obsessed. The whole
Right.
movie is a crazy person's obsession with someone and stalking them and murdering them and their friends. It's terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. It definitely, you know, I don't come to it with the same amount of love.
Mm-hmm.
Halloween was the weird horror franchise. So I've mentioned this before on the podcast that horror for me, like I grew up with horror because I'm an 80s kid.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up with watching stuff like Freddy and Jason and Michael and various
Mm-hmm.
other bits here and there, but I was more of a casual fan. I was a bigger
Mm-hmm.
comic book geek than
Oh, me
anything else
too.
growing up. And so yeah, I love comic books. I still read them to this day. And like my whole other love is the MCU and Star Wars. So that's a whole
Mm-hmm.
other thing. That's the geeky and the creepy and geeky. But so for me, like growing up, the Halloween franchise, and I think it's because that it had that big gap between 3 and 4 during
Yeah.
the 80s. And so there was a huge bit of that. And then by the time um, Halloween 4 came around, it had kind of like, I guess it was already kind of like, okay, well, we're already into Freddy and Jason. And again, I was just more of a
Mm-hmm.
casual fan and I liked them more. And Michael just never really did anything for me. And so, and I had seen the first three. I vaguely remember having seen the first three as a kid, and so especially number three. I remember number three. Pretty well seeing that. That was I don't know. That was one of those ones that like I don't know that one above any of the other ones. And we'll get into it later. That one above any
Mm-hmm.
of the other ones like hit me harder as a kid than anything
Mm-hmm.
else in the Halloween franchise. But it wasn't until the last few years that I really went back and um, watched all the rest of them. So these first three were the only three that I knew of until recently.
Wow,
So
that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So it's well, I mean, give or take quality, because like we said, these first three are kind of like the pinnacle
Oh yeah.
of everything. Even number three, even though it's set apart from it, it's such a I don't know, there's something to it that it lends itself to the whole overall mythology in a way.
Well,
Um
that ends like one of the things about the series that I've loved with a passion, especially with like the most recent three, is I love
yes.
how out of all horror franchises, this one has quickly become the choose your own adventure. Like there are
Yeah.
multiple timelines that you could follow depending on what mood you are. There's like
Yeah.
the original timeline, there's the Cult of Thorn timeline, there's so many different directions and whole sequences of movies that you could watch that would make sense depending on what
Yeah.
timeline you want to watch. And I think that's
True.
so interesting.
Yeah. No, I agree. And there's even something to be said about having if like with just a little bit of tweaks, you could actually make everything fit. Like, and I'm not
Hmm.
even kidding. You could make every movie fit into a full timeline if you just did a few little tweaks here and there to little bits of each one of these movies, and it would
Do you ever
all.
watch fan edits?
No, but I'm aware of them.
There's like there's I can't remember his name, but there's a dude that makes them, and he does exactly that. And
Okay.
like, and I have one of his for the Evil Dead series where he just made a couple tweaks to the first three movies, and they all flow together now as like one long continuous movie.
That's funny.
And God, and some of his Halloween edits are so enjoyable because they do exactly what you just said, and it's so
Yeah.
interesting to see the movies in a different way like that.
Yeah. I think that's what's interesting about that too, is that you can like that you like you said, it's a choose your own adventure. You can go off on these whatever kind of feel like you want to do. You can watch them in that way, but you can also with like we said, with just that little bit of a tweak, you can make it all make sense even into the new trilogy.
Hmm.
And
And
without
there's
putting
other
aside any of
franchises.
that.
Hmm. There are other
Sorry.
franchises. No, no, I think I talked over you actually.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
There are other franchises that are so disjointed that that's impossible. Like
Yeah.
I love the Texas Chainsaw movies, but every single one of them feels almost like an anthology because there's no connection whatsoever to a lot of them.
Yeah.
Like they try in a lot of the newer ones. Uh, a friend of mine, Seth Sherwood, he wrote Leatherface, which was like the prequel that came out, I think 2016, 17. And he
Yeah.
tried so hard to connect as much as he could. And his original draft of that script was so good and it connected so much. But at some point in the series, you're like, you just got to throw your hands in the air and be like there's no connecting the dots in some of these.
Well, that's like the Friday the 13th series. The Friday the
Hmm.
13th series has, I would say, at least the first eight hold to a general, you know, um, timeline.
Hmm.
It's a little fudged here and there, because there's so much. There's like huge gaps between the two, or between like movies. So these like eight, which is obviously set in the 80s. Um, at least in terms of what looks like the 80s in terms of dressing and
Hmm.
and everything like that, but realistically would be in the late 90s early 2000s at that point given the actual timeline.
Oh yeah,
So it's just bizarre when you go into it, but at least that kind of holds to a very loose structure.
totally.
Friday the or not Friday the Nightmare on Elm Street holds to a somewhat better flow, not necessarily, but Evil Dead, as much as I can see a fan edit kind of cleaning up that, I think that the Evil Dead continuity is fairly good.
Hmm.
So and Evil Dead for me is my favorite franchise, so I'll give
Oh,
that one a
dude,
pass anyway.
I cannot wait to watch Rise.
Oh man, it's going to be so good. This is
Hmm.
this is recording before the movie comes out, but will be released
Oh,
after the movie comes out. But definitely, I cannot wait because I'm super excited for that. I'll definitely
mhm.
be going Thursday night, so it's going to be a great time. So, but yeah, the Halloween franchise as a whole, like and like what I like about like these first like what I'll say with these first two even is that they're so locked together, that because two is just later on that night. Um
Hmm.
and so I love, and sometimes I'll admit sometimes for the most part I like number two better than number one, just because of the flow. I like number one a lot, and but number one has a long build up, and I get that that's
Hmm.
the tension. But for me it's not so much tension as much as it's just kind of like, okay, let's get onto the thing. And part of that's just my natural, like, newer movies get to the point quicker. You get
Hmm.
more kills quicker, stuff going on. So I get that that's what they're trying to do, is create the suspension and this terror and everything. But in number two, because it's starting off from where number one left off, you're jumped right into it. And so,
Yeah.
when I watch them, I'm just like, okay, number two, we're in action right from the beginning.
See,
And
the first one terrifies me. Like I get scared of it and I get excited by that. The second
yeah,
one to me is just pure fun. There's so
yeah,
much about Halloween 2 that I just love and I laugh about. Like I
yeah,
have spent years of my life, it's kind of like an inside joke with my wife that kind of just stopped to be an inside joke when it shut up about it online. I've been so obsessed with the failed like story of Laurie Strode and Ben Tramer.
oh yeah,
Like it's so silly and it's such a nothing story that
yeah.
like she just briefly touches on it in the first movie and then we see Ben Tramer get ran over in the second movie.
Oh
And
man.
like my wife and I have like developed long conspiracy theories about stuff like Ben Tramer was like when he got hit, he was just drunk coming back from a party and he was just like buzzed. And we have like long backstories. Like, and my wife does tattoos on the side and like on my right leg, she did an entire graveyard of like just really unimportant characters from horror movies that got killed. So I have a grave of Ben Tramer. I have a grave of Ted Hollister that got shot in the bushes in Halloween 4. Like
Oh
I have
wow.
Demon from Friday the 13th 5. But like Ben Tramer, oh man, that poor soul just getting hit for no reason
Yeah.
other than walking and like create. And see, Halloween 2 for me is the beginning of something that I have had a lifelong obsession with, and that is the crazy Loomis era.
Oh yeah.
Like
Yeah.
every movie that in the Halloween franchise that featured Donald Pleasance, with every movie, Loomis becoming unhinged gets more and more intense. And
Yeah.
to where by the time you get to Halloween 5, like he's holding Jamie up like to like he tease Michael Myers basically and then hitting him with
Yeah.
like wood and dropping chains on him. Like but and what's funny is like I love the Halloween movies so much. Like I love them more than most of my family, like my wife and kids excluded, obviously. But like,
Right.
if it became like if it came down to like saving my dad and my brother, or like Halloween 4 not existing, like sorry guys, you're going. But like I love how far the series gets from where it started. Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
most people say that in a negative way. I like, even though I'm not a big, huge fan of Halloween 6, especially theatrical cut, I do appreciate the fact that Halloween, the first movie, ended up being described as a senior citizen cult that like wants
Yeah.
to like run Michael Myers. Like it's so silly.
Yeah, no, it definitely goes in some bizarre corners for sure. It's yeah, and Loomis just yeah, like you said, Loomis just gets crazier and crazier. Although he's not crazy in number one though too. I mean, he's like, I get that he's concerned about Michael being just pure evil and everything, but it's just like, I don't know, it just does not seem very doctorly to be like hunting this guy down to kill him and everything.
Not
So
at all. There's a moment in Halloween 2 that is probably my second or third favorite movie in the whole franchise. It's the part at the beginning where the neighbor comes out like, like basically saying like, is this a trick? I've been trick or treated to death or something like that. And then Loomis looks at him like he's gonna beat the living hell out of this neighbor.
yeah,
like you don't even know what I've been through tonight. Like you better get
yeah.
inside or it's going down.
Oh yeah. No, it's crazy. Yeah, it's this is it's definitely a weird franchise, for sure. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's you've got this nigh unstoppable killer, and I get why they go into, and I'm going to discuss this with another guest in the next episode, but I get why they tried to go into the Cult of Thorn stuff to kind of explain how he was surviving and how he could survive
Mm-hmm.
everything, you know, beyond just, whatever. But at least in these first two, he's nigh unstoppable, but he's taken down, now and again. He gets back
Mm-hmm.
up, which is a little odd, don't get me wrong. Um, when you compare him to somebody like Jason, and Jason in the first few movies isn't unstoppable. He's actually very stoppable. He's stopped several times. He
He's
gets back
clumsy
up.
even.
Yeah, he's clumsy, he's
He falls
goofy.
off the chair in
It's
two.
it's not until number 6 that he comes back and then he's unstoppable and unkillable. But Michael, we never get that moment. He's just, he just plods along. He's just he feels unstoppable.
I
And
think that's why I think a big reason, and it took me a while to kind of fully grasp my own feelings on that. I think it's because even though the first film and especially 2018's film, they definitely focus on the fact that he's a person, a human being.
yes.
But I feel like what Carpenter tried to do with that first movie is not do that. I think that I think to Carpenter, Michael stopped being human the moment he killed his sister. And that's
Yeah.
kind of why in the script and even the film, a lot of it, like they refer to him as the shape. He's nothing
Right.
more
Yeah.
than the shape of evil. He's nothing more than the boogeyman. He is the boogeyman. You can't reason with the boogeyman. There's no, you know what I mean? And I think that's what I loved
Yeah.
about 2018's film so much is that Michael didn't care about Laurie in 2018's film. He didn't care he did not care about her whatsoever. She thought he was coming after her. No, in fact, the only reason that Michael came after Laurie in 2018's film is because Dr. Sartain drove him there. Like,
Exactly.
your trauma does not care about you. Evil does not
Yeah.
care about you. And I think that's what I love about the first film is that, like, yeah, he's a human being, I guess technically, but I think to me, it's more just like the fact that no matter what you do, fate it will be at your door at some point.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's where it boils down to is like Michael is, yes, he's physically human, but he's being driven by insanity and, like, I'm assuming, some form of rage.
Oh,
Um
totally.
and it just, like, this obsession, like you said, like he locks on Lori because she kind of looks like his the sister that he killed, and then that's where he goes. It's just that obsession. He wants to do everything to kill her. Where he goes from there, who knows? But at that moment, it's this insane obsession with her, and
Yeah,
that
and it's almost like
continues.
a game. Have you
Yeah.
noticed that? Like, and especially in that first movie,
Oh
it's
yeah.
more about it's more about the setup to the kill to Michael more than the actual kills. He takes more time to kind of stalk them and play with them than the kills actually really quickly or really quick when he actually does it.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, Nat Brimmer, who's an amazing writer, would definitely recommend his stuff. He just put out a book about the entire Puppet Master series. Oh, one of my
Okay.
favorite
Yeah.
writers around. Uh, he had a really good take on the first movie, how a lot of us don't recognize that it's almost like a haunted house movie in some ways. Michael sets up
Mm,
booby traps for people. That whole sequence at the end with Laurie, he purposely set up her friends to scare her before trying to kill her. Like, it's
right.
such an interesting thing, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and not only that, but like we said, with this obsession and stalking her, like, that scene where he's out next to that hedge, just, and then the scene where he's outside her window next to
Hmm.
the laundry. He's purposely putting himself there to scare her, to
Yeah.
show her that he's there. He's there
Hmm.
across the street when she's looking out the school window. There's all these moments that he's teasing her. He's like, I'm here. I'm coming for you. Not yet, but I'm coming for you. And like you said, then he sets up each of the friends for her to find later, and
Yeah.
to, like, drive that terror home. Look, I've killed all your friends, and set them up to mess with you. And it's
Hmm.
yeah, it's people like to say that he's just this actual mindless guy and everything, but he's not. He is very calculating and very cold and driven because he's obsessed with, in specifically in these first two movies, with killing Lori.
That and like the whole like setting things up to scare them. I feel like we kind of lost that with later movies up until 2018 because there's that whole sequence where uh uh Frank in 2018 the police officer he goes
Yeah.
in that house where Vicky and Dave are killed in 2018 and it's kind of a throwback to the first movie where like he sets up I think it was Vicky with the sheet over her and the pumpkin. Like it's all about like playing games with these people too. Even the
Yeah.
way that that character Oscar in 2018 is killed, with the fence. Every time the
Yeah.
light flashes, Michael's closer. It's a game to him again, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. No, I think that what they did with 2018 with the David Gordon Green trilogy in general, I think that he brought Michael back to basics.
I love it.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and just like all of that, and took each movie to explore different aspects of what that means. Like
Hmm.
it's Michael versus Laurie in the first one. That's our big battle. That's our that's the crowd pleaser right there. And that's what it was set up for, because he didn't know he was going to get the next two, because they had to prove that 2018 could succeed. And
Yeah.
then once it did succeed, then they got the next two fully greenlit. And then
Hmm.
in that second one, in Halloween Kills, it's how did Michael's reign of terror, the original reign of terror, affect the town? And
Yeah.
and what does that effect have on what they do? And then ends is about, because it's 4 years later and Michael's just disappeared randomly, and how does the town deal with that trauma after that? And so
Hmm.
I like that they did that. Like, each one of those is good. I know that both Kills and Ends gets a lot of hate, but I actually really appreciate that they went in these weird directions, and
Oh, dude,
in
me
a
too.
yeah, and it just expands that original idea. And the fact that Carpenter was on board as a producer and as the musician, as the composer, just says a lot to even him, because he didn't come back for any of the other previous versions. He wanted nothing to do with them. He
Yeah,
had
I think
written off the
three
Halloween
was.
franchise fully.
I think
What?
three was the last one he was
Yeah,
creatively involved with whatsoever. Like, I know that Carpenter and Deborah Hill had a really interesting take for Halloween 4 that they had Dennis
right.
Etchison write. And God, I love that script, but it is so weird that I totally understand why they didn't go that direction. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think what makes the first movie so special to me is it feels to me like the perfect storm of ingredients as far as horror. You have characters that you've known in your life or you have been in your life. Like,
Right.
growing up as a person who never quite felt like a boy, but definitely wasn't a girl. Like I you know what I mean? Like I didn't know who I was. This
Right.
is before terms like non-binary and all these things were widely known, and these were things that were not discussed in the 80s. So, I always felt like I was out of place in life, because
Right.
I didn't identify with Rambo. I didn't identify with all these
Yeah.
people. The character that felt like was closest to me in my life was Laurie Strode in that first movie. That was me down to the T. So,
Mm.
like, I think that first movie, we've all either been Laurie or Annie or Linda or even Bob. We've either been those
Yeah.
people or we've known those people. And I think I think we always talk about Carpenter, and rightfully so. But I think that is a testament to how wonderful Deborah Hill was at writing characters that
Oh
you
yeah.
really liked. All the scenes with the girls talking and stuff. That's Deborah Hill.
Yeah.
Like anyone who has babysat kids or went to high school. Like, we've had these experiences of getting to know your friends, hanging out with your friends, saying dumb jokes, taunting people that drive by, and it backfiring. Like, and the film it's scary, it's terrifying, but it's also relatable. Like, I love horror films that, like, I think that's where a lot of slasher franchises go wrong. And that's a big reason why I just adore the final chapter of Friday the 13th. And I've always said that if you take Jason out of the final chapter, it's still a great coming of age movie
Yeah.
because you care about all these characters and what they're going through. The first Halloween is exactly like that. So you have that, you have such great direction from Carpenter, and you have a very minimalistic score that it's almost irritating how locked into your head it gets every time you hear it. And I think that
Yeah.
that's a testament to, like, how powerful Carpenter's effect on the genre was with that movie.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. No, yeah, Deborah Hill's contributions to this movie, and and all of her work with John Carpenter and beyond, cannot be understated. She
Mhm.
was most definitely a force of of good in Hollywood. And it's but yeah, the score, like you said, it's minimalistic, but it's so iconic. I mean, literally just the Halloween theme alone is iconic, but any of that, any of the music that's in there, and it plays out through the rest of the series as well. It comes back no matter who the composer is, and he's the composer for these first three. But beyond that, the composers that come later have to touch on his music in some way, shape, or form because it is literally that iconic and that indelible to Michael. So
And it's
it's
fun
kind
to
of
hear that theme reinterpreted so many times throughout the years.
yeah, yeah,
Alan Howard started partnering with Carpenter, starting with the second movie for the scores, and then eventually took the mantle after Carpenter left for like four
yeah,
through whatever. And it was always fun to me growing up hearing what Alan Howard would do to each theme with each movie. Like the beginning of Halloween 5, growing up, I thought the credit sequence was just the Halloween theme with sound effects of knives and stuff. When they're slashing down on the pumpkins. It wasn't until I got the score on vinyl a couple years ago that I listened to it, and those stabs are actually part of the theme.
mm,
Like,
yeah,
and it's interesting to hear it go through different interpretations, like the theatrical cut of Halloween 6. Even though I'm not a fan of that movie, it's really interesting to hear almost like this heavy metal guitar version of the Halloween theme throughout the
right,
movie.
yeah. That's a yeah, and both and all of these three, Halloween 1, 2, and 3 each have their own little renditions of each one of them
Hmm.
too, and it's definitely unique in each iteration. So
Hmm.
it's fun to hear those. And speaking of the music, now is the perfect time to listen to one of Jerry's own tracks inspired by the Halloween franchise. This one is called The Shape, and it's from their first rescore album. But let's move on to number two. Um,
Hmm.
real quick. Number two continues the story. Later on, Laurie's presumably safe. She's taken to the hospital, uh, but Michael is still out there trying to find her, and eventually he does. And we get this bit about the sister, but that's still not in the theatrical version. The
Uh,
version of Halloween 2. Um,
the
like
sister, yeah, yeah, for sure.
Well, it's mentioned that there's a sister, but okay, I may have missed it again this time. But is it mentioned that Lori is definitely his sister
Yeah,
in okay.
yeah,
I thought that
yeah.
was
They
just in
find
the
out.
TV version that
Mhm.
they maybe the
They
TV version just
mentioned
focuses on more.
the nurse meets Loomis at the school in Halloween 2 and kind of
Right.
explains that there was another one. And then the car, when they're taking, when the trooper and the nurse is taking Loomis away out of Haddonfield, she talks about the sealed documents and how
Gotcha.
Lori's
Okay.
the thing,
Yeah.
and then Loomis pulls the gun. Uh,
Right, right, right.
Halloween 2 to me is about 75 to 80%. I just think a perfect movie. Like I
Yeah.
almost like it as much as the first movie. And like you said, sometimes I think the replay value of the second one's kind of more. Like it's
Right.
greater. I mean, like
Yeah.
it's like if I think that's the one I've seen the most on television, just because like if Halloween 2 is on TV, there ain't no damn way I'm doing anything else other than watching Halloween 2. Like that's just a given.
Right.
This last October, uh, we were staying in a hotel for a while, and there were so many movies that were playing on repeat, and I think we watched probably Halloween 2 the most. Uh,
Wow.
it's a blast. I think the only thing that it kind of suffers from, and it's kind of what we've been talking about here and there, is the explanation of why.
Yeah.
I think that once you find out why someone is motivated to do things like that, it takes the terror out of it. And I've always loved the story that Carpenter's told about how he just did not want to do Halloween 2.
Yeah.
And he never the end of Halloween 1 was never meant as a cliffhanger to another movie. It was that, you know what, evil escaped, it's out there, you can't stop evil. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that like the story, and I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a foreign beer commercial. I think it's for like Budweiser or something like that. I can't remember who did it. It's on YouTube and it's really good. Like they actually made this Budweiser commercial, and it's a young John Carpenter having a writer's block on where to go with Halloween 2 because he's contractually obligated to do it. And then he just goes to the fridge and sees a 6 pack of beer, drinks it all, and then writes Halloween 2. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened in real life. Carpenter did not want to do Halloween 2. He made an agreement to do another movie with the producer, kind of went back on that agreement, was going to be sued by the producer, and the producer said, I'll drop the lawsuit if you write Halloween 2. So he's like, oh, great, I got to do this. And so he
Yeah.
got really drunk. He got really drunk and wrote Halloween 2. And it was the year that kind of Empire Strikes Back came out. So,
Oh.
Luke, I'm your father turns into Lori, I'm your brother. And it's something that I think not only Carpenter regrets, because there's an interview that he gave right after Halloween 2 came out where Carpenter called it an abomination.
That's funny.
But he has spent his entire career since talking about how much of a mistake it was. And I do
Yeah.
think that the family angle has kind of rendered the series kind of like iffy from time to time because you go from this faceless killer that stalks people to someone that just wants to kill their family. And to be honest, like the stakes are kind of like lowered then. Because to be honest, like I
Yeah.
just won't hang out with the Schroeds then.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Just
Like
stay
I'm
away
just
from that
okay.
family.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were good.
Well, and there's this other thing too, because they're trying to explain by giving this familial angle to it and going, oh, well, he just wants to kill his sister. Like, I guess because he killed his other sister. Um, that that's the whole impetus for it all, that's his whole reasoning behind it all. That's still a very like thin reason. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't help the story much. Like so
Hmm.
everybody like hanging on this for the next several movies, the next, what, yeah, everything until Resurrection and Rob Zombie's movies, they, we have this family angle that makes no sense really. And so
I
it just
laughed I audibly laughed in the theater when my wife and I went to see the 2018's movie. When they decided to, you know what, we're not going to do the family angle, and we're going to explain why we're not going to do the family angle with such a throwaway line.
yep.
Like Dave's like, wasn't your sister? Oh no, that's just a rumor someone started, and that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. And then it takes it out. It makes Michael more like um scary again. It makes
Yeah.
Laurie's like her whole trauma and everything like like more in a way because
Hmm.
she's just been waiting for this guy who terrorized her for no reason at all to come
And it's
back.
her
And
obsession in those three movies, which I
yeah.
love. I love that Michael just does not give a crap about Laurie in the new movies at all.
Yeah, it's never been about her, like, and that's what's so funny is like he
He's just a
he's
weirdo.
just trying to, and in the new trilogy he was just trying to get back to his original home. That was
Yeah.
it. you know
Hmm.
why, we don't know. I kind of wanted that explanation, but again, they didn't really explain things, and it kind of, that's kind of the hallmark of the series in a lot of ways.
Well,
Anything
even
revolving around Michael and his motivations is just kind of like,
mhm.
we're not going to
Well,
explain it.
I know we're not like deeply talking about ends whatsoever, but I even
Yeah.
love the fact that the only reason Michael shows up at Laurie's house in the third one is because he was kind of following Corey. Like he still
Yeah.
didn't care.
Yeah, he didn't even know Lori was there, and that's what's
Yep.
so funny. And then they end up having that fight, and he is near death anyway. So it's just,
Yeah.
he's so easy to take out in the end. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, relatively, but it's just, oh man, it's that cracks me up, and I love that because that's ultimately where it should have been in the first place. And that's what I
Well, that
appreciate about the
mhm.
trilogy, the new trilogy, is that they took it to its logical conclusion,
Most
where it should have
definitely.
maybe gone in the first place. So
Yeah, and I going back to Halloween 2, I think one of the many things I love about the movie is I think out of every Halloween movie, I think 2 might I think I have the most fun with it because like there's so many sequences that are just like out there and just a blast to watch. Like as a kid, I saw uh even before I saw Halloween 4, there was a couple scenes of Halloween 2 playing on the TV at a babysitter's house, and I had no idea what it was. But the only scene I watched was the kind of hot tub scene where
yeah,
Michael, he had already killed Bud, and he goes back to kill the nurse. And I remember as a kid watching this movie, I had no idea what it was, and I'm thinking like, why is she licking his fingers? Like, it's just there's so many weird sequences where it's like she's licking Michael Myers' dirty hands, and it's just
yeah,
like she only notices that it's not Bud when she sees the disfigured hands. But wouldn't you notice this dirty ass hand that hasn't been washed in 20 some years, probably? Like
well,
there's
the
that.
funny,
There's go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. No, go
No,
ahead, keep going.
I was just gonna say there's that. There's I mean I don't I don't know who wrote this scene. I mean Carpenter probably did, but like that or if Rick Rosenthal thought this little touch would have added to the ambiance. But the part where the other nurse's clogs fall off after she's suspended in the air, I
Yeah.
never not giggle at that when it happens. Or like Jimmy slipping on the blood and
Yeah,
Laurie almost getting murdered at the end because Jimmy's head won't get off the horn. Like there's
yeah.
so many scenes in this movie that like you're on the edge of your seat and you're just like laughing, having a great time watching a movie. Like a two is I think it's the fun Halloween movie out of all of
Yeah,
them.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's what makes it, and it's fun, but they don't make Michael dumb, and they don't make anybody really dumb or goofy. You know what I mean? They're not
Totally.
playing
Hmm.
anything really for, they're not playing anything for obvious laughs. It's more of the unintentional laugh more than anything else, the
Hmm.
intentional comedy. Like you said, him slipping on the blood, the clogs falling on the ground, the him like on the horn. Like these are unintentional, more uncomfortable laughs
Well,
than
that
anything
and
else.
it also extends what I said about the first movie, and I think that's another reason I like the Halloween movies so much is with the exception of a few of them, I care deeply about every movie's characters. And again, we're not touching on this movie right now, but I do think it's important to say most of my most of my life up until a few years ago, I hated the character of Tina in Halloween 5. I was just like,
Mm.
okay, that character is obnoxious. Please go. Until a few years ago, where my wife pointed out, like, hey, that character's so close to our daughter. like Dahlia, like why do you hate that character? And I was thinking like, what? That's right. And I love our daughter's personality. Like maybe I'm a little too rough on that, and I've since come around. But like between Halloween 2 definitely, like Jimmy is such a likable character, I think.
Oh yeah.
You know, and throughout the series, I think Dave in 2018 is my favorite character in the new trilogy. Like these are all like whoever writes each movie, I think really has a knack for writing characters that you don't want to see get killed. So it affects you more when they are. And I think Halloween 2 has that too. Like obviously some of them are just fodder, you know, to get murdered. You know, like I don't think anyone's having a fan club for the security guard that gets hit in the head with the hammer,
Right.
but you still have characters that you care about. Everyone's known some a-hole that won't shut his mouth like Bud, you know, like the kind of perverted uh, 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 paramedic, you know, like everyone's
Yeah.
known all these characters. The stickler that won't let you visit a family member after visiting hours, like you know the nurse,
Yeah.
the head nurse. Like I watch these movies, especially the first five, actually, and the new trilogy. I watch these movies and I have such a fun time like getting to know these characters and kind of living vicariously through these characters for an hour and a half or so because like to be as much as I love slasher movies in general, like that's my thing. Like anyone with a little bit of honesty will admit that a lot of them, like it's more about body count, you know, like
Hmm.
especially in some of the Friday 13th movies, it's definitely body count. Like you don't really care, you know,
No, yeah. Well, you
but
don't get the
like
opportunity to care. The characters aren't well written enough at that
oh,
point. So
totally. But then you think of
yeah.
like Friday 2, Friday the 13th 2, not like Ice Cube's second Friday, but
Yeah, yeah.
because yeah, I don't relate to Friday after next, but that first Friday then. No, I'm just kidding. But like Friday 13th 2 or Friday 13th the final chapter, like these are characters you love. And I think Halloween, you know, like a lot of people it one a bummer thing that I've noticed, especially in the horror community online, is it seems like everyone has their series that they love and they like
Hmm.
teaming them up against another series to see which one's better, not realizing that hey, we could like all of them. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not the biggest Scream fan, but I'm super stoked that they exist to the millions of people that adore them. But in no way am I gonna like compare Halloween to Scream because they're just two different movies, you know? And
Yeah.
I think as far like I'll see a lot of people being like, well, no, this series has more consistently good movies. And for me personally, and I'm only speaking to myself, the first five Halloween movies are solid for me. And then the new trilogy, that's another three that I love. So this
Right.
series has at least eight movies, almost nine, because I've come around to really appreciate Rob Zombie's second Halloween lately, the last few years. So I
It
mean, you
seems to
get a
be
good
definitely getting a revisiting. Like people are
well, I
critically
think what was
revisiting
wrong
that
with
one.
that one, totally, especially director's cut, which is so much better than theatrical. I think what a lot of people are finally realizing is the same thing that it took me years to realize that no, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is not a good Halloween movie by any means, but it's
Right.
kind of a fun movie in general. Like it's weird, it's interesting. If you kind of forget it's a Halloween movie, it's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I've already recorded my episode for that one with my guest for that one. So definitely it's something we kind of get into a little bit for sure.
Hmm.
But yeah, I agree that it upon this rewatch, and I only got to watch the theatrical versions of both of his movies. Upon this rewatch, I they're still low on my list.
Hmm. Oh, me
But
too.
they what?
I said, yeah, me too.
Oh yeah, they're still low, but and that's mainly because I'm not the biggest Rob Zombie fan. Like I
It's very hit
his
or miss for
movies,
me.
yeah, his movies are just that kind of hillbilly horror type thing. And I've said this before on the podcast. Hillbilly horror for me is just not generally my thing. Like, you mentioned the Texas Chainsaw franchise. That's not I've tried to watch those. I've watched a little over half of them, that none of them have grabbed me. And I
Hmm.
just don't see any of the rest of them. I've watched all the major ones. So it's
Hmm.
just like, they're okay, but they're not for me. And that's where I am on that. Like, I know, and I knew you weren't a big fan of the Scream series, which is kind of a bummer because I really like the Scream series. But and I was hoping you'd do a rescore of that. um,
Actually, what's funny is I might anyways, because my
okay,
my 12-year-old daughter, like that's their series, and
right,
I you know I we still take them to every movie that comes out. I think it just wasn't a series for me when it first came
right,
out, but I've actually revisited them in the last few years and grown to appreciate them a lot more. And I went to
yeah,
the theater last year to see the, was it fifth Scream movie?
yeah,
And I
yeah,
actually loved that movie, which it
yeah,
caught me off guard because I was like, I've never liked a single movie in the series. Uh, Went to see the new one recently, and it was kind of back to my original thought. But like,
oh wow,
I
okay,
I, I do appreciate I do appreciate what that series offers, even if it's
yes,
not necessarily for me. And I'm
right,
I'm the opposite of a lot of people in the sense that I've noticed, especially on social media, that if someone doesn't like something, they kind of make it their mission to tell people they don't like it, and
right,
they try
yeah,
to try to dampen other people's perspective on that. And
right,
at the end of the day, I appreciate every horror movie existing because that is somebody's favorite movie. You know what I mean?
exactly,
Like,
yeah,
I think it's great. Every time there's a huge discord about a discourse about a movie that comes out, I think it's silly because it's just like,
yep,
if you don't like it, don't watch it. But I
yes,
do appreciate the music of Scream
oh yeah,
tremendously. Oh
yeah.
dude, I some of my favorite music is from that series, even though I'm not a huge fan of the movies themselves. So that is actually a title I've been meaning to tackle myself.
Okay. Well, I will definitely look forward to that for sure. Um, but yeah, I agree with you. I'm of the same thing. Like I try to be positive whenever I post anything online because it's more about, you know, for me, like I'd rather post about the things that I enjoy rather than post negatively about things that I don't enjoy. And when I do have to say something about a movie that maybe I didn't really like, I just say it's not for me because
Hmm.
that's all it comes down to. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily a terrible movie or anything else. There are so many movies that I think are generally terrible that people love. And
Oh,
I'm not
same.
going to put those movies down because that's somebody's favorite movies or whatever. And
Yeah.
that resonates with them on a level it just doesn't for me. Like the people who really love the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series or people who loved The Exorcist or The Shining or whatever, those are movies that don't resonate with me. I get that you
Mhm.
love them. That's awesome. I will champion your love for that. Just don't push it on me because I don't care.
I think I think the lesson that I learned, and it was a hard lesson, unfortunately, is early on in my writing career. Uh, right around the time I started writing professionally about movies, there was this trend, and I think it's gotten worse, unfortunately. There's a trend where everyone wanted to be the snarkiest, wittiest reviewer, you know? And
Yep.
I got into it and I was like, oh, maybe I need to do that. And it just didn't fit. And I remember I completely obliterated a movie in an early review I wrote, not realizing that there were people on the other side of that, you know?
Yeah.
And one of the directors, it was a directing duo. One of the directors reached out and they weren't even mean about it. They're actually very nice about it. And they wrote me a letter early on. And I have, to this day, I've never stopped feeling like crap after reading that. And it's just like, who was I to completely ravish and obliterate this person's work because
Right.
I wanted to get some one-liners and jokes in my review. Like it was rude. It made me kind of reevaluate a lot. And one of my biggest inspirations as a reviewer back in the day was Scott Weinberg, and he's given me a lot of advice back in the day. And one of the first things he said was, uh, a lot of people fail to remember the fact that critic, it's not taken from the word criticize. It's actually taken from the word critique, which is a very
Yes.
different thing than criticize. You could take art and you could take it apart and mention what works and what doesn't work in your opinion. But that doesn't mean you need to get hateful and completely slam all this stuff that people do. And
Right.
I think a lot of people don't remember that. They don't realize that. Like, I have such passionate, passionately negative feelings about Rob Zombie's first Halloween movie. Like, I'm sorry, like maybe I'm breaking my rule of not being negative for half a second. But I'm sorry, describing Michael Myers as a long-haired Kiss fan that kills his sister because he's pissed about not going trick-or-treating, and like
Yeah.
I just it's not for me, but like you said, and like I said, that is somebody's favorite movie. So who am I to go
Yeah.
online and say that you're an idiot for liking it? Like some there
Exactly.
I've met people out there, and you might not believe me, and whoever, like your listeners probably won't believe me, but I've met people out there that Halloween Resurrection's their favorite of the series. And you know what? While I don't get it, like you go, like have at it. Like
Yeah.
this last year that Screen Factory released that 4K box set of Halloween
Yeah.
6, H2O, and Resurrection. And for I was asked to do original music for all of the Halloween Resurrection documentaries.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
my first thought was, this one, out of all of them, you guys are asking me to do music for the Halloween Resurrection box set, you know? But then I thought, like, you know what? How fun would that be to play in that sandbox officially of the Halloween movies? And
Right.
I went back and I watched the movie, and it still isn't for me. But I actually found little nuggets of like interesting things. I think the first 10 minutes, the stuff in the corridors has some great music. And that's kind of where my positive stuff about the movie ends. But
Yeah.
there's a thing or two in there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's what's good. And I agree with you. I think that people get into this critic mode, and this is why I don't really read critics.
Hmm.
Because here's where it boils down to, and that people have to understand about critics is it's their opinion about something.
Yeah.
They are not stating fact at all.
Nope.
What they are saying is not, if you are interested in a movie, go watch the damn movie. Don't listen to what
Hmm.
other people have to say about it. Make up your own mind. Like that's
And
that's ultimately where it comes to
don't get
me.
like don't treat it as if it's biblical.
Yeah.
Like I've had people say that they won't watch a movie because of a review I wrote, and I tell them, please do. Like,
Yeah.
art is subjective. Just because I didn't like it doesn't mean it won't be your favorite movie, and vice versa. Then and I've see I stopped being a critic because uh, it would either be one extreme or another, or editors that I would
Right.
have would take one throwaway line and turn it into something huge, and it would backfire.
Oh man.
I'm on the cover of Leatherface, with a quote that said it's the best movie in the series since the original. And I think my original review said it was my favorite movie since the original.
Oh
But like,
wow. Okay.
yeah, I've gotten so many emails like, "What? You should stop watching horror. You're an idiot." Or like, like that quote on the cover of Host, the Blu-ray, where it's like the scariest film of the past decade. That's me. But again, I was just saying, this movie scared me more than any movie in the last few years. So
Yeah.
like, I think people want to run with reviews, whether they're a little too positive and publicists want to make it out like you said it's the greatest thing ever, or like people think that if you didn't like a movie, suddenly they won't.
Right. Well, and I think that's where we also have to take a critical look at things as fans and realize that when those blurbs are put on boxes or, you know, or these reviews or anything, they are also heavily edited and, tweaked for whatever maximum amount of context they can put into it. So that, you know, these aren't maybe what the original writer had to say. Like you said, your quotes were taken completely not out of context, but stretched the context a lot to make it fit what they wanted to put on the box. And it's as viewers, we have to also be critical of that and
Mhm.
not put so much stock into all of that. I'm not saying that reviewers don't have a purpose. I'll go when I read reviews, I read reviews after I've seen the movie because I want to, like, if there's a movie I want to go see, I'll go see it regardless of what I hear anybody else saying. Now, if
Mhm.
people like if I'm hearing nothing but good word from people online, that just makes it feel even better for sure. Like Evil Dead Rise or Renfield, which I just saw last night and was excellent. So it's if you see that kind of stuff, sure, if it feeds into what you already kind of hope, then yeah, that's great, that's awesome. But it but also at the same time, there's a ton of movies that get rave reviews that I'll never go see because they're not something I want to go see.
Oh,
So
totally.
I'm
And
not
I'm
the
kind of the
kind of
opposite. I'm kind of the opposite in the sense that if most people hate a movie, that kind of excites me. Like I purposely have not watched a single trailer or read a single review of the new Ari Aster movie. Just
oh
because
yeah,
I love the first two. I don't want to
yes.
know a single thing about the new one, but I do know that a lot of people hate it with a fiery passion, saying it's the worst thing ever, career ender, A24 needs to answer to this.
Wow.
And if there
I
isn't
haven't even seen
anything
any
that's
of that.
made, oh, people hate that movie right now. And if there's anything that made me want to watch a movie, it is reading all that stuff.
Well, I'm a big fan of his work as well. And
Yeah.
so I'm very interested. I'm not a big fan of Joaquin Phoenix,
Oh, same.
personally, but yeah, so that's been a hard sell for me. But I'm willing to overlook that to see if this movie's good, and it looks it looks weird. So
Well, then,
I have watched the trailers for it,
I
but
think when it comes to like horror in general, and especially I think the Halloween series has suffered from this, is that people don't realize that art is subjective. One
yes,
person's, I'd hate to paraphrase Batman Returns and talking about the Halloween series, but Penguin, you flush it, I flaunt it. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like different people like different things,
I mean,
and
there's whole video labels like Vinegar Syndrome and Severin and all these other ones
yeah.
that have made tons of money selling terrible, crappy direct to video like stuff that people love. I don't get
Yeah.
it. I've bought some of them myself. I watch them and I'm going, why?
Do
Why
you know
was
how
this
many
something people
copies of
love?
Stone Cold I have bought throughout the years, and now I have to buy a new one?
Wait. Stone Cold, the Brian Bosworth movie?
Yes. Like there was another edition of that movie recently announced, and it's like, how many times do I have to pay money for bad movies?
Yeah. No, for sure. But if but that's what I'm saying. Like, there's so many movies, like movie companies that are like thriving off of this market of people just gobbling up these terrible movies because they were things they saw as kids. And this nostalgia is just
Yeah.
like it's overwhelming. And don't get me wrong, there's movies that I have that are terrible that I love. Maximum Overdrive and The Wraith,
Oh yeah.
those are terrible movies from the 80s, but I love them because they're terrible and because they remind like I get that feeling of watching them like sort of from when I was a kid. So
Well,
I get it, I
mhm.
understand it completely.
I
Go ahead.
think a lot of people grew out of having fun. It
Yes.
seems like every movie that comes out these days has to be the greatest or the worst thing ever. I
Right.
never grew out of that. I never grew out of being a video store kid that,
Yeah.
what? If you put a movie in front of me, as long as it entertained me, I don't care. Make it
Yep.
as weird as
Yep.
possible, make it as serious as possible. As long as I have a smile on my face or like there's some emotion that is going through me with the movie, you won. And
Yep.
it's like, especially horror films, every movie doesn't have to be life changing. Sometimes movies could just be okay. Sometimes they could be good. And I think that's what I love about the genre because out of every genre, you get movies that have a lot of really interesting subtext and important things to say, but you also get horror films that are nothing more than, I don't know, Adam from Workaholics trying to survive a summer camp. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
like the genre I think is just the best as far as having stuff for everyone. And I think the Halloween
Absolutely.
series kind of does that too. There's
Oh
so
yeah.
many different takes in the series that go in like kind of more conventional routes or like the really like way out in left field routes. I mean, before we started recording, you and I were touching on the producer's cut of Halloween 6 briefly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I said, when I was a kid, if you told me that somebody would stop Michael Myers with magical runes, I would have laughed in your face. But the fact that
Well,
that exists is great.
yeah. Well, and that it's Paul Rudd of all people. I mean, Paul Rudd's one of the few people that's been able to actually stop Michael Myers. So,
And he looks older in that movie than he does now.
oh man. Oh, and then like Paul Rudd knew the assignment on that one too. Like he is hamming it up, and not in like
He
a
is
really
chomping
like
up
bad way.
scenery.
He is yeah, he is chewing the scenery, but in the best way possible. And actually the funny thing is that up until this point we have had the most insane Loomis ever, and then in this one we get a more subdued Loomis. And so it's just
Hmm.
this interesting thing where like almost the Loomis baton has been handed to Paul Rudd's Tommy. And
And
because
like throughout the
ultimately,
series, mhm.
go ahead.
No, I was going to say throughout the series, we've gotten unhinged Loomis like amplified with each movie, but I have loved the different moments in the series where you get very small, brief moments of Loomis just having clarity and peace. Like Halloween 6, right up until everything gets brought back to his door, like he's writing his manuscript.
Yeah.
Halloween 4, when he's like sharing some liquor with the fucking or that. Sorry, I didn't mean to
No, you're
profanity
good.
on the show, but
You're
okay,
good.
cool. I was worried about that.
No.
There's in Halloween 4 when Loomis shares a drink with Reverend Sayer as he's driving,
Yeah.
and he looks over and he kind of smiles at him, like, you know what, like maybe this won't be as bad as every other encounter, and it was.
Before we get into Halloween 3, here's another track. This time, it's the song Haddonfield from the album Spells 2.0.
I like that in every movie in the series, there we get a couple moments of peace with different characters. You know,
Yeah.
like there are moments in Halloween 2, and especially in Halloween 3. Like, oh God, I love Halloween 3 for so many reasons. Like the score, I think is just amazing. I love
Yes.
how weird it is. I wasn't one of those people who kind of reevaluated it with time. Like I was a kid
No.
in elementary school telling everyone they should watch Halloween 3, and then the next day they came back and threw me in the trash can because it was awful to them. I've always loved it. It's a weird movie, but
I
I love how dumb and just not caring Dr. Chalice is. This is a guy who
yeah.
runs out on his family, grabs a six pack, and just
Yeah.
goes to Santa Mira with a lady, tries to
Yeah.
like bed her the whole movie. Like he's not a good person, but it's so much
No.
fun to watch his journey.
No, and this is the thing. Like for me, like I agree with you. Number three is actually my favorite of the whole franchise. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's it's because it is bizarre and weird. It's got a great score. Like he leans heavily into the electronics at that point.
Oh
Like
yeah,
the first two scores definitely electronic and very synth heavy and everything, but this one's more like actual like computerized, like more like blips and beeps and everything else.
yeah,
And I mean, and obviously for good reason, because this is very much this weird mix of Stonehenge and computers. So it's just bizarre. But I just love it because there's so much. And I remember this one the most as a kid because of the masks and and
that
I didn't
jingle,
really what?
that jingle.
Yeah, oh God. Yeah, the annoying, like catchy jingle. Um, and 6 more days to Halloween. Yeah, it's just crazy. It's so
Man,
good.
it's
It's so fun.
mean.
It's so bizarre. Yeah, it's
It's
mean.
such a
Yeah.
mean movie. Like
Oh,
any parent that has rambunctious kids
yeah,
after
just
that
slop them
scene with
down in
little
front of this.
Buddy, yeah, after that scene with little Buddy, you're almost like, okay, how do I get to Santa Mira really soon with these kids?
Yeah, it's so funny. It's so weird and bizarre, and I love it because, and ultimately, I think it can fit into the overall story because of the Cult of Thorn aspect we get in the later movies. You can tie it in, and it
Well, not
can
only
work.
that, not only that, did you read the original thought of idea for ending Halloween Ends?
I had
There was
not.
one idea that was thrown around that at the end of the movie, you would see an assembly line of masks being made. And there's the Michael Myers mask. And then someone pulls it off the assembly line, and there's a silver shamrock thing on the mask on the inside of it.
Oh man, why did they not do that? That would have been
Right?
perfect. I mean, we
Right?
already got the nods to it in the first place with the kids who were wearing the masks
Yeah.
throughout that new trilogy, but like
So it's
yeah, that would
in
have
the
been a
continuity
great
already.
nod to
Yeah.
that.
Hmm.
Oh man, that would have been so good. Oh, what a missed opportunity. I like yeah, I like ends. I like ends a lot. I love what it's doing. I love what it's saying, but yeah, that would have made it even better for me.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, number three is just so wild and bizarre, and it's the one that I remember the most. From as a kid, remember watching that because of that, like the masks and everything else. It was just so bizarre. Um, and it wasn't Michael. It just was its own story, and so it was just a fun movie to watch.
My
So
favorite thing about Halloween 3 is how many times the original Halloween is on TVs in the movie. And so Halloween 3 came out less than a decade before the first or after the first movie, right? So the first movie really wasn't around that long by the time Halloween 3 came out. But every
right,
time you see Halloween on the TV in Halloween 3, they're like the immortal classic. Like it's been around for
yeah.
decades.
Oh man, but that just goes to show, I mean, not even just within itself, but that actually just goes to show that Halloween became an instant classic and
Oh
that
yeah.
it hit the pop culture so hard that it could become an immortal classic.
Well, it went back and forth, like Sean Cunningham's always been very open and transparent in saying that Halloween being successful is what made him want to do Friday the 13th. Like, okay, we could
Right?
copy this. We could copy this. Victor Miller, this is what you do. Copy Halloween, you know? And so what's funny is Friday the 13th was created by Sean Cunningham wanting to kind of ape the success of Halloween. And then Halloween 2 was very much a product of its time, saying, okay, well, Friday the 13th's come out since then and it's very gory. We need to amp up the kills. So it kind of
Yeah.
became throughout the 80s, uh, kind of this back and forth between the two.
Right. Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah. Well, and then because they ended up like they went off in that the different direction with number three, and number three definitely gory, but again doesn't have anything to do with Michael. And then it lay
Yeah.
dormant for most of the 80s, where Friday the 13th continued year by year making a new one, and then Freddy came out, and
Yeah.
and so by the
Blew
time
all of them
Michael came
away.
back, it was kind of like, okay, where you been, dude? So,
Yeah.
um,
Now three
but
was very much three was very much a franchise killer for a long time,
right, yeah,
which bummed
and I
me
get,
out as a kid because God, I love that movie.
oh man, it was so good. Like it's still so good. I love watching it. Um, and talking about this movie and just this series in general. I want to talk to you a little bit about your music, your
Mm-hmm.
Rainy Day for Ghosts music that you
Mm-hmm.
do, and that you've done. Not only have you done, rescore uh, songs for it, but you've also done a whole album that you said is a stealth Halloween tribute,
Mm-hmm.
which is Spells 2.0. And
Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
and I
I
love that album, and it's got a track on there that is very reminiscent. And I mentioned this to you, in messages that I realized was a track that seemed at least to be inspired by Halloween 3, which was Spells. So
Yeah, yeah. I did that. I did that album. It was originally going to be very blatantly Halloween related, but I had just started working on like about a lot of the rescore stuff that I do, and I kind of felt like, well, maybe that's a little too much. You know what I mean? I didn't want to be like the person that like only does that kind of stuff because I feel like once you
right,
get into a gimmick, it's hard to shake it.
right,
Like like I get that a lot of people, and I'm in no way dissing this band. Actually, like, I like some of their stuff. But like I feel like there's that band Ice Nine Kills
okay,
that kind of
yeah,
like every single thing they do is based on horror movies at this point. And it's just I
right.
feel like at some point if they try to do something else, it's gonna be very hard for them fan base wise.
It'd be hard
So
for them to
like
get out of it.
for
Yeah,
me, yeah, for me it was just like, okay, if I'm gonna start doing rescore albums every once in a while sporadically, I'd like my regular stuff maybe not to be in that. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna call it Spells. And then
right,
I put on a few more tracks and called it Spells 2.0. And it kind of secretly became a Halloween thing. But like there are actual tracks on there that are very much about that stuff. Like I did a
right.
theme, I did a track where it's just in my head a fever dream that Lori's thinking about while passed out on meds in Halloween 2, where it's about her and Ben Tramer. And there's one that's very much Halloween 3 influence, like you said. I
Right.
just I love doing them. I love doing them so much because I you come across covers of themes a lot and that's fine, like no disrespect to that, but me
Right.
personally, I feel uncomfortable touching John Carpenter's work. I feel
Yeah.
uncomfortable touching the work of people who I admire, but I do love playing in the sandboxes of movies that I like, maybe like watching a movie and figuring out what is the feeling that this theme gives me, like how do I create
Right.
that same tone without ripping off their music. So that's what like the rescore tracks have allowed me to do,
Yeah.
and I'm putting out a third one later this month that has been so much fun to do because I've tried the first two ones were more franchise based. Like these are
Right.
my favorite horror franchises. Whereas this third one, it's like, what are movies that I just really like? And I tried to do movies that were very different. Like I did one on 10 to Midnight, which is one of my favorite Charles Bronson movies ever. Or Miss 45. I did one on Candyman. There's one for Saw that I decided to kind of hold off a little bit because it's kind of a special track that I replaced with
Okay.
another one. So it's kind of molding into something different as far as the initial tracks that I announced that I were going to be doing. Like there's some different ones. Uh,
Right, right.
yeah, but I love doing them. And actually, like it hasn't been announced yet, so I can't go into super details. But I was asked by a festival in London
Oh,
to, because of these, I think, to rescore a classic horror film for a special LGBTQ charity event.
oh
And
wow, cool.
I'm basically getting to rescore one of my favorite classic horror films in its entirety myself.
That's
So
awesome.
like I love doing these things so much. And yeah, I know I've said that I don't like touching other people's work, but like Scored to Death, which is this really great documentary on horror
Yeah.
composers coming out. Uh, I actually have a track on the vinyl, the soundtrack album that is coming out with it, where different composers cover their favorite themes from different movies.
Right, right.
And I got to do I mean, there's people that did like music for Green Room or tons of great movies that are on the soundtrack, and I'm so like
Right.
grateful and blessed to like be on there too. I get to do my take on the theme for Puppet Master, which has always been a huge series for me too.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, that's really cool. Like I'm, you know me. I I'm a huge fan of your music. And like I play it all the time. I'm sure on my Spotify wrapped this coming December, it'll be, you'll be high up on my list of everybody who I played
Nice.
this year because I play it like pretty much every day.
I
And
appreciate it.
so, yeah. And I love your stuff. And I agree with you that I think that what you do with your rescores and any of your work that you do that's inspired by that kind of music, you're not doing something similar to what the original composer did. You're doing something that I can tell is something that could fit in that. It's your take on what that movie makes you feel, and
Yeah.
like that is more interesting to me as a listener than somebody who just kind of reworks and kind of
Oh,
retweaks an original thing.
totally.
Now,
And the
don't get me
whole
wrong, I am
the,
interested in hearing your Puppet Master thing, but but the stuff that I like to hear for sure is like these different alternate versions. Like what would you have done in this version,
No,
like
totally.
instead of
And
that? So
the reason I started Rainy Days for Ghosts, like it's a little depressing, but I'll keep it brief. My wife and I lost a child a few years ago named Ghost, and I was really depressed about it. I hadn't played a single thing of music in a long time because, I cut my teeth playing in like punk rock and hardcore bands for years. Like I kind of scoffed at the idea like that I learned how to play piano and all this stuff as a kid first. I was like, oh, that's not cool. I want to scream. It was so dumb.
right.
But like I was really depressed about our baby. And it was raining one day and I was just in a dark place and I was just going through this range of emotions that I really did not know how to put to words. I was withdrawn
Right.
from the people closest to me. I did not know how to talk about what I was going through. So I just started recording music just to get moods out, vibes out. And that at first it became a project that was 100% my way of confronting whatever emotions I was going through at the time. Like
Right.
it's always been mood for me, that project, Rainy Days for Ghosts. Every single release, it's whatever mood I'm in. So the
Yeah.
rescore stuff was tricky for me because it's such a personal project, Rainy Days for Ghosts for me. Like it's the most important musical project I've ever done because it's literally attached to my heart. But I learned that in doing so much of that original music for myself, that I was able to kind of capture emotions and moods better than, just writing a song about it. So when it came down to trying to rescore stuff, I think the very first one I did was Texas Chainsaw. And I was like, wow, this sounds like it could have been in one of those movies. And I don't mean that in like
Right.
an arrogant way, it's just like as a listener, I would have liked
Yeah.
that in a movie. So it kind of became a thing where like I can do these every once in a while. I could do like an album of like mood music for movies that I love without covering stuff because like for me it's not about being precise, it's not about being technical, it's not about recreating what John Carpenter did. It's about the feeling and the emotion that those movies give me. And hopefully I can recreate the mood that these movies give other people too.
No, and I think that fits well within to your to what you said, you make the main music that you make for Rainy Days is for the feelings, to get out those feelings, and that's what you're doing with the rescores in a way too, is you're getting out the way these movies are making you feel, and you're interpreting those feelings into the music rather than just trying to go, okay, well, this is just my version of what I think it should be. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
this is the way it makes me feel. And I
Totally.
think that's actually fascinating, that's how that works. And so that's as somebody who doesn't, as like barely any artistic bone in his body, but loves art in so many different ways, I'm always fascinated by that creation process.
Mm-hmm.
That's
I keep, like, I have a lot of keyboards and instruments. That's kind of my obsession. But I keep the crappiest little version of GarageBand on my phone at any point, whether it's like day job stuff or I'm at the supermarket. People will be shopping for burritos or something in the supermarket, and there's like me playing on synth stuff, walking down the frozen aisle. Like I'm always trying to just create stuff on the fly, just to kind of keep that. Because I think whether it's filmmaking or writing or music or podcasting or being a YouTuber, a gamer, or whatever you do, whatever you're passionate about, like, it's all valid. But
yeah,
I do feel like you got to keep the machine oiled. Like yeah, it is a bicycle. Like, you never quite forget it. But I think if in any creative uh artist, like, you have to continually be creating, or else you kind of feel dormant. And me, if I'm not creating something, and that's kind of why I have like so many things going at once at all times. If I'm not creating something, I kind of feel like I'm wasting time.
yeah.
Like, I like writing, I like making music, I like making movies. Like, it's all fun stuff, and I think, like, creativity has helped me out so much in life that I don't know. It's just like a universally great thing.
Yeah. No, I truly believe in the arts in general, and just, how that can help anybody. Like I say, I don't have a creative bone in my body, but like, I have ideas for stuff. I just have no outlet for them.
Yeah,
That's
but
by
what
and
you're doing
large.
right now, I mean, what you're doing right now is cool. Like, you can,
Yeah.
like, honestly, and I'm not trying to say this because we're talking, but, like, dude, like, I listen to the show, and I'm amused. Everyone that listens to the show is amused. They like hearing your take on movies. Like, I think that's just
Yeah.
as valid as someone painting a painting or making a song or making a movie.
No, and I agree with you. I like, whenever I listen to podcasts, and I gravitate towards a podcast that I like
Hmm.
too, it's, because of the hosts and because of what
Totally.
they're giving me and everything like that. So I appreciate anybody who listens to me. Like, there's so many podcasts out there these days too, and my audience is very small still. So it's like, I average about maybe 15 to 20 listeners per episode. But I appreciate that, because that means there are people out there who are coming back, maybe new people who are just trying out an episode and may come back later. So I appreciate that out of all the various podcasts that people can listen to, that somebody comes and listens to mine, and and I hope that they're enjoying it and having a lot of fun, because I have a lot
Hmm.
of fun doing it. That's ultimately
Hmm.
where it comes down to for me, is that I do
Hmm.
this for myself. I needed a creative outlet, and I've been wanting to do a podcast forever, and film is one of those things that I really enjoy. And I really enjoy talking to other people about it, because we all come from different backgrounds and everything else, that when you talk to somebody about film, like we said earlier, it's all subjective. We all like these movies for different reasons, or we don't like these movies for different reasons. So it's always a fascinating conversation. And I love going on the tangents with people, and, because you never know where the conversation is really going to take you.
Hmm.
And that for me is more fascinating than even just the movies themselves. As
Oh,
much fun
totally.
as it is to talk about the movies, it's more fun to talk about what those movies, how those movies made us feel, what our connections are to them, and everything, and where that goes from there. And that's what
Hmm.
I love about that. So yes, I do feel like, I'm contributing, at least some in some way, to an art form,
Totally.
which I fully enjoy. So yeah, it's and that's why, and like I said earlier, having your music on here now is really great. Like, and I've talked to you before, like right now I'm using an existing piece of music that you already made. It's a newer piece, which is really great. But I will at some point reach out and get a fully original piece from you that I like, can maybe work with you a little bit to get perfectly for the thing. Although the piece of music that I'm using right now, which is called Gratitude, is just so good. It's like it fits so well with what I'm doing. So
Yeah, dude, I'm
really love.
always down. I like creating music. It's I haven't reached the point, and I don't think I ever will. The point where you get so used to doing something that you kind of lose your love for it. It's
Yeah.
happened actually, I could be honest, and I won't go super into detail, but it almost happened this last year. Uh,
Yeah.
I was hired to score a movie. It was a dream come true. Anyone that knows me knows exactly what movie I'm talking about. Lifelong bucket list movie, lifelong bucket list series. It was the most, oh Lord, it was the worst experience of my life creating
Oh man.
something on a job. The end product was not something I was happy with because as the movie went on, the director behind my back decided to scale down my involvement up until I have maybe one or two themes in the entire movie, but I'm still listed as a co-composer. They thought the director went behind the producer's backs, went from behind my back, and decided to use pre-existing music from former entries in the series for 80% of the movie. None of us knew until the movie was turned in. It got it was a bad experience to the point where
Yeah.
the head of the studio called me to apologize, saying he didn't know what had happened. So like
Wow.
that was the only moment so far where I was like, maybe I should quit doing what I'm doing. But that was so short lived because I
Good.
love
Good.
making music. I love movies. I love so much about it that it's just like I, I don't think I'll ever lose that love for it.
That's good. I mean, that's the reason why I signed up for your year of your year subscription was because I was like, I can't miss any music, especially if it's going to be
Oh, I've
exclusive
been
like
working
that.
on a lot that I'm getting ready to send out to anyone who did that. Trust me.
Oh, I can't wait, man.
A
I like
little too
every bit
much.
every
Like I
bit
know
you
I
put
said
out,
two
man, I
tracks a
gobble up.
month. I know I said two tracks a month, but anyone who subscribes is getting a good amount of stuff. Trust me.
Woohoo. You heard it here, people. Oh man, that's awesome. Like I love that because like I said, I love your music. So I get hyped every time I get a new track. So
Nice.
it's awesome. Well, is there anything that we didn't talk about these three movies that you wanted to mention? Uh,
Uh, honestly, the only thing I can think of is a question for you because
okay,
everyone I've talked to, and I interviewed Tom Atkins about Halloween 3 for an issue of Scream
okay.
Magazine a couple years back, and he had his own opinion on it, and Tommy Lee Wallace had his own opinion on it. Do you think Dr. Chalice succeeded at the end of Halloween 3 of
Oh,
stopping what happened?
that is a tough
Tom
question.
Atkins says yes because he cannot fathom living in a world where that happened. I think
I
he did
want
not stop them.
I think he did not stop them either. The fact that
Awesome.
he was
Yes.
the
Our
fact that
numbers
he
are
was
growing.
yelling it and it was still going just says to me that he didn't stop it. And that,
Yes.
you
Awesome.
know, yeah. There are definitely some dead kids out there. Not as many as there
The
would have been because he
best.
did stop two of the channels from doing it, but
Yeah.
you know, but that last one I don't think he got stopped in time.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
yeah. Yeah, it's yeah. I don't know. Like I love that movie just because, yeah, it's a downer ending, like or it's kind of left up to your own opinion if you want to go either way. Like I get it if you want to think happy thoughts, but I think it was too late.
Yeah. They're dead. Those kids are dead.
Yeah, it's more interesting that way. I mean, as much as it
Right?
sucks, it's just more interesting that way. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, no. All right. Well, yeah, that's a great way to end that. Why don't you let people know what you're working on now that we haven't already covered, that you're allowed to talk about, and
Yeah,
um
sure.
and
Let's see.
let people know where they can find you.
Sure. I'm on all social media. I keep my Instagram kind of locked down just because I'm a pretty
Right.
private person when it comes to family. But on Twitter, it's at Jerry is just okay. When I joined Twitter about 15 years ago, I had no followers, and I thought it would be a funny joke to have my handle Jerry is awesome. And when I
Right.
started writing professionally and stuff, everyone thought I was really arrogant. So I changed it to Jerry's just okay, so people wouldn't think that. I like talking about movies on there. So if anyone follows me, yeah, chat about movies. Other than
Yeah.
that, like I said, I'm putting out Rescore 3 later this month on the 21st of April, uh, which I don't know when this episode's airing, but it might be out by then. Uh,
It'll be out by then.
it's okay, cool. Yes. April 21st, Rescore 3, 9 tracks, different movies. It's been so much fun. I have my take on Puppet Master on the Scored to Death vinyl coming out. Uh, the announcement for the festival that I'm doing, the classic film rescore, should be announced pretty soon. I'm really
Okay.
excited about that one. Uh, I can't say what it is exactly, but I'm a huge Universal Monsters fan. Take that
Okay.
how
All
you
right.
will. Other than that, yeah, I'm working on some short films for some directors. I got hired to do a couple of those, so I'm excited
Okay.
about that. Uh, yeah, my novella reunion is coming out later this year. It's a really mean little book. Uh, it's kind of a metaphor for kind of surviving through child abuse, but in a very mean, brutally violent mass cult murder kind of way.
Okay.
Hope people like it, but I actually had to put off releasing it for a while because of a lot of current events in history that I just didn't want something about children being passed away, like something about children getting killed with the current landscape kind of made me feel kind of weird, so I was just like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna give some time, but then to be honest, school shootings are never stopping, so I
It
figure I
doesn't
might as
seem
well
like it's
put out
going to
my
go
book.
away, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm always working. I'm always doing music, working on movies, writing for magazines, that kind of stuff. So yeah, and I like talking about movies. So like if anyone ever wants to chat about movies, hit me up.
Yeah. Definitely go follow Jerry on Twitter. They are uh, a good follow. You'll always know when they put up new music. So, and anything else.
No, that's
It's,
good. And thank you so much for having me on the show. I really had a fun
yeah.
time.
Yeah. I'm glad we could finally get it worked out. Yeah. I've been hoping to get you on for a long time. So
Totally.
it's been
Love to
really
come
good.
back anytime too.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I will definitely have you back on. Thanks again to Jerry for joining me. Next week, Jordana Brissett joins me to talk all about the Cult of Thorn and Jamie Lloyd in Halloween 4 through 6. And here's one final track by Jerry, the song Spells, which also comes from the album Spells 2.0. Thanks for listening. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving the show 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, please share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. Music for the podcast composed by Jerry Smith. You can follow the podcast on social media at Creepy and Geeky on both Twitter and Instagram. If you'd like to follow me, I'm GeekThulu on Twitter and geek.thulu on Instagram. You can support the podcast by donating to the Ko-fi page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.